Royal Highness, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and dear friends of NEO, we are so pleased to see all of you here today. I'm very pleased to address you as the director of the NEO Collaborative, a unique collaboration between the Academy of Athens, Themis, and Stockholm University. I would like to personally thank the president of the Academy, not least for hosting us here in this beautiful building, but also Her Royal Highness for her strong and very personal commitment to the sustainability agenda and for joining us here today. It's really a pleasure. And also a special thank you to the Embassy of Sweden and the Ambassador that also supported us very much here today. When we started the planning of this seminar, we decided that the underpinning ambition should be to focus on how scientific insights contribute to sustainable development within a framework of new climate economy. We argue that this topic is more relevant than ever. As we heard from Professor Serifos, we have huge challenges ahead of us. But at the same time, we also have many countries in the EU today setting very ambitious targets on decarbonization and also sustainable development. And actually, the EU Commission right now is in a process for pushing an agenda that the entire EU should reach net zero emissions by 2050. One consequence of this agenda will be large investments into research and technology, shaping part of the European research agenda for decades to come. In the 2014 report, Better Growth, Better Climate, the case was made that there isn't necessarily a strong trade-off between economic growth and climate action. The report argues that a new climate economy, the concept, driven by the interaction between rapid technological changes, sustainable infrastructure investments, and increased resource productivity, could build the foundation to address growing climate, environmental, and resource challenges, while at the same time deliver sustainable and inclusive growth and development. And this is exactly what the EU is also trying to achieve. The objectives should be, and are in many ways, actually interrelated and complementary. To be successful, however, policy and decision-making at all scales must focus on the main drivers of change: investments at scale in sustainable infrastructure, research and innovation systems, significantly improved resource management and productivity, policies to support stronger corporate leadership and engagement, and investments for the transformation. And there are opportunities, a lot of opportunities today. Technological advances and falling cost of renewable energy have made sustainable investments more attractive than ever before. Look at this curve. It shows the cost development of solar energy compared to fossil fuels. You have the fossil fuels at the bottom, very low cost, rather stable. The curve starting at the top there in 2009 is the cost of solar, ending in 2015. Solar, wind is competitive today on its own right. Why is this cost curve important? Well, this is an example of development that supports one of the key conclusions of the new climate economy report. The fact that there may be 90 to 100 trillion, that is 1,000 billion, dollars of investment that we will see in infrastructure projected up to 2030 already would not need to cost much more, even if investments are made climate smart and sustainable from the outset. In fact, because of lower operating costs of clean technologies, it could deliver savings instead. In addition, other co-benefits of investing in sustainable and clean infrastructure are significant. Cities where we can actually breathe, move, live healthy lives. More resilient power and water systems that we need in Europe, not least considering what Professor Serifos just outlined in terms of water resources, for instance. and that cannot then withstand increasing numbers of extreme events. But also ecosystems that are more productive, robust, and resilient. So the international system then, and the response of that. Well, many years ago we had the Copenhagen meeting, not that many years ago, actually in 2009. The evidence outlined in the New Climate Economy report served as one important inspiration behind the discourse shift between the climate meetings in Copenhagen, the previous picture, people were not too happy, and in Paris, 2015. And working in the international UN system for many years, 6 years is nothing. It's a huge shift in mentality that actually happened. The discussion moved from how to share the costs of the transformation to instead talking about how can we share the benefits the transformation will actually generate to society. Such a mental shift should not be underestimated. An additional important factor was the strong backing of, in this shift by the private sector, the corporate sector, as well as thousands of cities around the world. This was a game changer. However, we still have a long way to go. We know that, and 2018 was actually the 4th hottest year globally since 1880, reflecting a broader trend. 19 of the 20th warmest years since 1880 has been since 2000. Concentrations and emissions of greenhouse gases continue to reach new records. Effects such as sea level rise, Arctic summer melt, ocean circulation disruptions, increased weather events, floods, droughts, and disruptions are becoming more evident. Extreme weather events also have high costs, and in 2017 alone, the costs reached from extreme weather events $320 billion. Globally. Many systems are under severe threat, not just because of climate change, but also from polluted air, water, oceans, degradation of agricultural land and natural landscapes, and loss of biodiversity and ecosystems. All these combined put pressure on our systems. If we are to limit the worst effect of climate change, because we still can actually influence those projections that Professor Serifos presented. These are projections still. If we are to reverse those and keep in line with the Paris Agreement, global greenhouse gas emissions will need to reach net zero in the second half of this century. In 2018, emissions actually increased again at a very high rate, as you can see here. This was due to high increase in energy demands, and in particular then in China, India, and the United States, covering 70% of that demand increase. And unfortunately, according to the International Energy Agency, 70% of this increase was provided also by fossil fuels, breaking a trend the last couple of years where actually renewable was the dominating news source. There remains a significant gap between national commitments of Paris and the emission reductions needed. And you can see that in this graphic, just to get a sense of the urgency and the challenges that we have. What you see, the 53.5 gigaton of carbon dioxide from fossil fuel use emitted in 2017. If we are to reach the 2-degree targets by 2050, we need to reach 20 gigaton, more than half. If we are to reach the 1.5, we have to reach 5 gigaton. So actions can't wait. The world continues to develop, and not always in a very sustainable way, as you can see from these pictures. Over the next 15 years, the stock of infrastructure is expected to double, as I mentioned. The world economy will likely double in the next 20 to 25 years. The world economy will double. And urban population will nearly double over the next 30 years, growing by 1 million people every week. One Stockholm is built every week, one Athens every month in the world. 400 million more city dwellers in India by 2050, 1.5 times the US urban population today, should be built in 35 years. These transformations will happen in emerging markets and developing countries, but there are also pressing needs to replace aging infrastructure in many developed countries, as you know here as well. With the scale of investment that will have to be made in the next 2 decades, now is the time to ensure that such investments are climate smart, resource efficient, and maximize benefits to society at large. Because at the same time as while moving to a climate smart society, we must also achieve a range of other equally important development objectives. By 2030, global leaders, politicians, they have committed to eradicate poverty. They have committed to feed a global population of 9 billion people, provide billions with clean water and sanitation and electricity services, upgrade skills, including through education, secure better health for all, and close gender and inequality gaps. We must also recognize and handle social disruptions, as well as geopolitical changes that the transition to a low-carbon economy may entail, if not well managed. And government actions remain important, there's no question about it, but leadership is increasingly in the hands of cities, driving the transformation, and companies as well. So corporate responsibility is extremely important here. We are at a juncture. On the one hand, many countries are making progress, and the transition to a low-carbon, resilient economy is part of major global structural changes. This includes urbanization, as we talked about. It includes increasing globalization, a shift to service-based economies, and digitalization. But progress falls short in terms of the pace and scale needed. And in addition, a number of worrying economic, political, and social trends have also grown stronger. As Karin mentioned in the beginning, sustainability is also very much about the socio-economic dimensions. We have increasing international trade tensions. We have stressed public balance sheets. We have social unrest and populism. Predictable, coherent, and long-term policy signals are more important than ever before to spur innovation, open markets, lower financing costs, and to attract both public and private finances. EU and its member states have the opportunity, and I would argue the responsibility actually, to drive the developments at scale, proving that we can combine ambitions with the climate transition with the goals of a welfare state. So what about NEO then? As you can hear from my presentation, I love global processes. NEO is a very local station, but with very strong and global networks, you can say. Well, NEO operates in a region that in so many ways are at the center of this transition, no doubt. Climate change is predicted to lead to significant impacts, as we heard before, in this part of the world. And this region faced, in particular, challenges related to scarcity and overuse, and partly also mismanagement of fundamental natural resources. This includes, of course, water and bioresources and land, for instance. And all these environmental changes and challenges have socioeconomic impacts, there's no question about it. And in particular then in key sectors such as water, agriculture, and energy, which are critical for sustainable development. This is also a region with significant socioeconomic differences. And then I talk about the broader region, the Mediterranean region, with countries ranging from high-income EU member states to fragile states with considerable development and security challenges. The political geography of the region makes integrated planning complex, ranging from transboundary water and coastal systems, transboundary air pollution, and land, freshwater, coastal, marine interconnected systems. We need further science policy interactions in areas such as climate change, mitigation and adaptation, natural resources management and utilization, human mobility and migration issues, spatial planning and urban development, just to mention a few. At the same time, there are huge potentials. To renewable energy systems, large-scale solar facilities are constructed in many countries around the Mediterranean as we speak today. And actually, some countries argue that they will outcompete Northern Europe in terms of being the battery of Europe in the future. So we have to be careful also in that regard. But this is also a region with potential of sustainable tourism, as we heard, for instance. So now it's the time really to just accelerate actions. We know what we need to do. Focus on opportunities rather than just problems the new climate economy can bring, and increase our efforts to mobilize both political determination and broad investments for a rapid and just transition at scale. And I would argue, coming back to NEO, that in a time of rapidly changing environments, science plays a critical role. Karin, you mentioned a number of them. Astrid, you also did so. Providing the basis really also for robust decision-making, but also helping, guiding, and outlining strategic options to handle complex system interactions, because we will face many of them. NEO is established exactly for this purpose. So I look very much forward also to the 3 sessions that we will now have, and that I feel reflects NEO in different ways, NEO activities. They will provide further insights into various dimensions of the new climate economy. Many of them are, of course, also discussed here today. This will range, as we heard, from urban development and corporate strategies, integrated land, water, coastal zone management, the source-to-sea concept, innovation and energy transition. But I also look forward to have this opportunity today, during the lunch break and the reception later on, to hopefully talk to many of you here to discuss how NEO can further develop into a platform for science, policy, practice, interactions, and sustainable development for Messenia, for Greece, for Europe, and for the world. No one else but we have actions in our hands, so we have the responsibility. Thank you so much for this opportunity to address you here today.